Number 10. Avengers 1 million BC, Earth 616. Alright, look, I promise this is the only Earth 616 story I'm mentioning. But given the team and the story, how can I not? The Avengers of 1 million BC came together in the prehistoric era to face Zagreb the Aspirant, basically a mad celestial. The team was made up of Odin Bor's son, wielding Mjolnir, the mutant Firehair, the avatar of the Phoenix Force, the sorcerer Agamotto, like the Eye of Agamotto, that guy, Fan Fei the Iron Fist, the first ever Black Panther of the Panther tribe, a mammoth riding Ghost Rider, and Starbrand. They first appeared in Marvel Legacy #1 in 2017, and I'm not even going to explain the rest. Just go read it, please! Earth 76611, alternate history. In Fantastic Four Annual number 11 in 1976, Power Man knocked a vibranium cylinder into Mr. Fantastic's time platform, sending it back in time. The cylinder was split in two halves. The important to this topic half landed in occupied France in 1942 and created an alternate branching timeline, Earth 76611. In this alternate timeline, the socialist Germans used the vibranium to advance their war effort, successfully invading England in 1943 and even making it to Manhattan by 1944, taking over America by 1946. That's what half a cylinder of vibranium can do, apparently. The Fantastic Four realized what happened though, and through some confusing tomfoolery, they managed to prevent this timeline from replacing the Earth 616 timeline. Number 8. Earth 9591, Ruins. This alternate reality is going to be the most recent one, taking place in the 90s. The timing of this one doesn't factor so much into its story though, as the more relevant detail is that this is the universe where literally everything goes wrong. The entire Fantastic Four, except Ben Grimm, who was replaced by Victor Von Doom, died on their test flight. The X-Men are held in a prison in Texas where they are horribly disfigured to stop them from using their powers. Peter Parker's spider bite caused an infectious rash that mutated his entire body and caused his hair to fall out. Bruce Banner becomes a monstrous mass of tumors. The Avengers all died in a rebellion. The Silver Surfer went mad, wanting to know what it was like to breathe air again. Nick Fury became a cannibal. All sort of that really lovely stuff, you know? I would not read this story unless you're okay with being upset, but I would read this story because it's good and it's interesting.
Number 7. V. V comes to us from Alan Moore and David Lloyd's series V for Vendetta. He's a mysterious character who is also known as Patient Number 5, who's said to be one of the many victims of abuse in a resettlement camp run by the fascist and villainous Norse Fire-ruled government. It is believed that V was a test subject at the camp who escaped. He then adopted the mantle V and began to work on building an anarchistic uprising to topple the oppressive regime. His methods were meant to appear morally ambiguous so that readers could decide how to see him, as a hero or as a madman. V made his first appearance in the series Warrior in issue number 1. Also, if you haven't checked out that little story that he's in Warrior, V for Vendetta, it's really great. Just saying. Also, the series is great.
Number 6. Earth 84243, Conan in the modern day's 70s. Some people may not know this, but Conan the Barbarian is actually part of Marvel Comics. And while the era he lived in, the Hyborian Age, is part of the 616 continuity, the What If story on Earth 79213 isn't. Instead of being in the Hyborian Age though, our boy Conan gets stuck in the 20th century. After visiting the Hyborian trade city of Akbitana, he is captured by a wizard who specializes in time travel. And instead of escaping, he is transported to Manhattan on July 13th, 1977. What does he decide to do with himself? Well, after scaring off some punks and throwing an old lady in a trash can, he has a romantic encounter with a modern age lady, Danette, who shows him the Guggenheim Museum, which reminds him of an ancient citadel, and they go to investigate. Here, he fights off some muggers and then gets struck by magical lightning that transports him back through time to his Hyborian age. But at least he got to keep Danette's cap as a reminder of their romance.
Okay, number 5, Marvel's Gargoyle. This superhero first appeared in Defenders issue number 94 in 1981, but since then he's actually retired and settled down in Greenwich Village. He even opened a restaurant called Isaac's Oysters. But he did go for one more rip for old time's sake, aiding Iron Man on a mission to take down the android Korvac. But that's sort of been it for him. And what's cool about this superhero is that he was sort of meant to be evil, but just chose good. He was formed when Isaac Christians agreed to place his soul inside a cursed gargoyle and do the bidding of the six-fingered hand. This was all in exchange for his issues to be resolved. But then, when he was tasked with capturing Hellcat, a member of the Defenders, he couldn't get himself to do it, and defied the six-finger hand. And just sort of kept living on as this like possessed gargoyle, who chose good. He kinda reminds me of Beast. He just has this super wholesome energy to him, and I just feel like he could do for more of that sweet, sweet limelight.
Number 4, Earth 717, Captain America in the Civil War. The what if stories are so cool. And what if Captain America, Stephen Rogers, actually fought in the American Civil War instead of World War II as General America? Given powers from an ancient Native American eagle that also turned an evil racist Bucky Barnes into the White Skull, who became the leader of a white supremacist group. Because of General America's involvement in the Civil War, the Union won the war a year earlier than it normally would have. Abraham Lincoln survived his second term in office. He helped rebuild the South, suppressed the rise of a certain group of hooded racists, and prevented the Indian Wars from ever happening. He would go on to fight the White Skull and his new, deadlier hate group, eventually being succeeded by a line of Captain Americas who were his descendants. Well, hey there, time traveler. You're from the time period where YouTube still lets you like and subscribe, right? Well, if you're enjoying this video right here, why don't you just go and hit that thumbs up? It sure helps us out a lot. Alrighty, let's get on to the top 3.
Number 3, Magneto. Magneto has been known as the foil to X-Men's Professor Xavier for years. Xavier was also the leader of the X-Men, while Magneto was the leader of the first Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, who were often the X-Men's enemies. Still, Magneto does what he does often to make the life of mutants better, albeit through punishing humanity, which, you know, not so great. And while he has spent a lot of time being a villain, over the years he has definitely shifted more to anti-hero, especially in the new Dawn of X mutant relaunch, where he often works alongside Charles. Although Charles is always like, calm down, man. And he's like, no! I will slightly overreact, because I'm Magneto, and that's what I do.
Number 2, Earth 811, Days of Future Past. Earth 811 is a future timeline where Sentinels rule over North America. After their creation, almost all mutants have been hunted and exterminated. The mutants that were not killed are kept in concentration camps. Even the heroes who aren't mutants have been exterminated. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Daredevil, they're all gone. But hey, this is the future, not the past. Yeah, I'm getting there, okay? Rachel Summers, the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, uses her telepathic powers to send Kitty Pryde's mind back into her younger self's body. Specifically, Kitty's mind went all the way back to the Halloween of 1980, where she informed the X-Men of what their future could become, and they prevented the assassination of Robert Kelly. The story is a whole lot more complex than that, and is also one of the most prized Marvel stories, so give it a read! Number 1, Earth 311, Marvel 1602. Okay, Marvel 1602 is my absolute favorite Marvel alternate universe. Fun fact, it was the first Marvel writing escapade for superstar fantasy writer Neil Gaiman. The universe actually got its start in a different alternate reality, Earth 460, where Purple Man became president for life. Most heroes had been hunted down or had died from old age, but after Captain America is captured, he is banished away to Earth 616's 1599, shortly before Roanoke was formed, which inadvertently created Earth 311. For some reason, the presence of Captain America destabilized reality and began the emergence of heroes and villains into this world who are counterparts to many of the present-day heroes and villains of the Marvel Universe. Count Otto von Doom the Handsome, Witchbreed, which are mutants, Grand Inquisitor Enrique, which is Magneto, Carlos Xavier, which is Charles Xavier, Four from the Fantastic, Sir Nicholas Fury, Peter Parquois, David Banner. The story is so interesting, intertwining actual history with superpowered beings. I highly recommend you give it a read if you haven't already.
Number 10. Black Panther. The leader of Wakanda made his first comic book debut appearance in Fantastic Four issue 52 in 1966. He is often credited with being the first black superhero to appear in comics. The only sad thing is that it took us that long to get one. The 60s! Such a long time in comics, so long. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. The first story involving him in the pages of Fantastic Four Volume 1 are pretty hilarious and great. If you haven't read them, you kind of should. They're interesting. Black Panther invites the Fantastic Four to Wakanda. Naive as they are, they accept. But what they don't know is that Black Panther longs to fight them. Of course, while the comic originally seems to be spinning Black Panther as a villain, it is later revealed that he only wanted to test them, and the fighting was merely to prove their merit as he needs their help. In the next issue, issue 53, we learn more about his backstory and why he has sought out the Fantastic Four. We are also introduced even more to the land of Wakanda with its unique combination of new age tech and tradition, old and new. So there you have it. Number 9. Green Lantern. Before Hal Jordan or Guy Gardner, there was Alan Scott. He was the first Green Lantern and was created by Martin Nodell, making his comic book debut in All-American Comics issue 16. When this first Green Lantern made his appearance, he probably seemed to be pretty cool, I'm sure. This was way back when the Green Lantern was still an actual lantern, by the way. It's just this lantern he was carrying around. But in retrospect, Alan Scott is known as being one of the silliest Green Lanterns because he has one of the strangest weaknesses in comic book history. Wood. While there definitely wouldn't be openly gay superheroes for some time yet since he was introduced in 1940, I like to think the fact that he is helpless against wood might pose a double or symbolic meaning. I'll just let you ponder what you will about that. But that's just me. Either way, the weakness is a hilarious one to see in comics, just villains beating him with wooden clubs and baseball bats, and it would later be fully explained and made semi-logical later on, but still, it's ridiculous. And I love it. Number 8. Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger originally started appearing in a comic strip and would later receive his own comic book series in 1948, which went for over 100 issues. Before he was even in comics though, Lone Ranger was a superhero recognized for his radio show, which debuted in the early 1930s. The first few comics consist of compilations of his comic strips, but new stories began with Lone Ranger starting with issue 38, which saw Paul S. Newman writing and Tom Gill on art. The Lone Ranger was known as a mysterious masked Texan Ranger who would fight bandits and outlaws in the Wild West of America, with his loyal pal Tonto and his trusty steed Silver. Hi-ho Silver away!
Number 7. Riot. Riot is, well you guessed it, another symbiote created because of the Life Foundation. Riot bonded with Trevor Cole, who was a mercenary. Riot took on a very similar appearance to Venom. His build, size, and color scheme were all very similar. He's also considered to be the most violent of the Life Foundation creations. Riot is also the only one of his siblings to make a live action appearance, so far. He was the main antagonist in the 2018 film Venom. Now, in the film, he didn't actually merge with Trevor Cole, instead he went with the head of the Life Foundation, Carlton Drake. Who knows? Maybe we'll see some of Riot's siblings in future films.
Number 6. Superman. Superman is that hero that you usually think of when someone asks who the oldest superhero is during a trivia night. And honestly, I'm sure it's an acceptable answer by most trivia standards. But not here. Not here. Here we go further. Superman is widely thought of as being one of the oldest, the original American comic book superhero. But seeing as how he is number 6 on this list, I think us mega nerds would likely know otherwise. Still, he came out in 1938 and first debuted in Action Comics number 1. And honestly, if you read his original appearance, it's easy to see what all the hullabaloo is about. It's basically a piece created to show off and introduce just how unstoppable Superman is. In fact, Superman would continue to be presented as near invincible until the 80s, acquiring more and more powers with each appearance. And then we had to fix that. We had to tweak that because it's too much power. Superman was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Number 5. Green Lantern. This comic was originally published by National Periodical Publications, who, as we know now, would later become one of the companies that would amalgamate into DC Comics. The series would run for 38 issues and would introduce the first Green Lantern, Alan Scott. One of my favorites to bring up because I get to talk about his weakness to wood. In this first issue, we would discover how Alan got his powers from both the Green Lantern ring and an actual Green Lantern, which was created by an old Chinese lamp maker from molten green space metal that had crashed to Earth via meteor. This original series really put the lantern in Green Lantern. It's not even a funny joke, it's just really bad. You're welcome. Number 4. Kazar. Kazar is known as being one of the first Marvel superheroes. Can you guess who the other one is? Let me know in the comments. But there are actually two Kazars. The one I'm referring to here is David Rand. He appeared in Marvel before they were even known as Marvel back when they were Timely Comics in 1936. Kazar shared many similarities with Tarzan and was very passionate about protecting the surrounding wildlife and animals where he grew up. He also fought against Germany with the Allies in World War II, fun fact. In fact, the last story we have of him shows him setting out to provide more wartime aid. The other Kazar we would meet later in the 60s was known as Kevin Reginald, and was the son of the man who discovered Savage Land. Both Kazars also appear to be English. They had an English heritage anyways. Interesting.
Number 3. Toxin. Toxin is one of the newer ones on this list, but of course that doesn't mean he's actually really new. Toxin debuted all the way back in 2004. Now, since all symbiotes create their offspring alone, they don't actually need to mate with one another. This eventually ends up happening to Carnage. Now, Carnage was naturally worried because each offspring is said to be stronger than their predecessor. Because of that, Carnage was ready to kill it as soon as it was born. Good old Carnage. When Toxin was born, Carnage just couldn't kill it. He did try, but Toxin was just already too powerful, and it ended up bonding with Patrick Mulligan, an NYPD officer. Toxin is also red and has a slim spider-like appearance when he was bonded with Patrick, but later on he ended up bonding with Eddie Brock and grew to be a lot bigger and way scarier. He also has an amazing healing factor and is more resistant to sound and heat than most other symbiotes.
Number 2. Buck Rogers. Buck Rogers first appeared in a comic strip. He is a hero who comes from a world of sci-fi set in the future of the 2400s. 24,000s? 2400s, yeah, 2400s. Depending on what medium or comic you're reading, the last 2 digits of that year are also apt to change for his story. He made his comic strip debut as Buck, but the character was originally named Anthony Rogers in the novel that inspired the comics, Armageddon 2419 AD, written by Philip Francis Nolan. The story follows the adventures of a young man who is frozen for almost 500 years in suspended animation before waking up in the future and rediscovering the world he once knew, in a time that he is less familiar with. Honestly, if you aren't aware of Buck Rogers, but you are a fan of cosmic superheroes or sci-fi and weird space adventures, I highly recommend you check this classic out. Also, if you just like some time travel-y stuff. Who doesn't like time travel-y stuff? Everyone is like me, I hate it, but there's a few of us I know that like it. Number 1. Spring-Heeled Jack. Spring-Heeled Jack was originally a character in English folklore and urban legends. His being was reportedly cited all over Great Britain in the 1830s, and the stories involving him inspired writers to use him as a character in both a play and in Penny Dreadful novels, which were short serials, the original comic books really of the time. He has since seen other comic book series dedicated to him as time has progressed. Spring-Heeled Jack was originally described as a gentlemanly looking demon, and later described as looking like the devil himself, complete with horns. He was often known for breathing fire. Whoa, scary stuff. While his character was originally posed as a villain, he later developed into a misunderstood hero, a nobleman who sought to steal from the rich and give to the poor, complete with his own gadgets to help him perform his noble feats. Kinda like Robin Hood meets Batman. It's kinda what he was doing. Meets a guy that looks like a demon. Just combine all those, you got Spring-Heeled Jack.
At number 10 is Tigra, first appearing in her own Marvel comic book called The Cat in 1972. This superhero just doesn't get the spotlight very often. Considering she has been a member of the Avengers in the past, it would only make sense that she might appear more prominently in more recent issues, or even MCU movies. But sadly, her most recent appearance was in a supporting role in Avengers Academy between issues 1 and 39. Tigra's powers began as an experiment by Dr. Joanne Tumalo, who gave her powers attached to her costume, and in this form she was simply known as the Cat, but down the line is when she eventually mutated into Tigra, a human-tiger hybrid, through a mystical ritual. She was then bound to a race of humanoid cat people from the Middle Ages, which she could then transform into on command from her human form, using the cat's head amulet. She's a pretty cool hero, so I wonder why they haven't really brought her back in any big way. Maybe they found her too similar to DC's Catwoman, who knows. Next up at number 9 is Stingray, an oceanographer turned superhero who builds his suit in order to explore the depths of the ocean. He helps construct an underwater city covered by a glass dome which he uses to try and grow food for mankind. He first appears in Tales to Astonish number 95 in June of 1967, so he's just on the cusp of the golden age. Just about. This guy is no doubt an older Marvel creation, and if you haven't heard of him, you may not be alone. Although he has appeared as recently as the Iron Man 2020 event, he still only appears briefly as a side character facing off against Captain Barracuda. But at least the writers of that issue probably had the same thought as me, that he deserves to come around again. Once again, my hunch is that he's just a little too similar to DC's Aquaman, which might keep Marvel from giving him any more spotlight than they already have in more modern issues. Although his buddy Namor the Submariner, looks like a carbon copy of Aquaman. But Namor appeared for the first time in Marvel's first ever comic book, Marvel Comics #1 in 1939, whereas Aquaman didn't appear until 1941. But I digress. It just seems that DC found a way to occupy the underwater superhero market, which keeps us from seeing more characters like Stingray and even Namor more often. At number 8, we have DC's The Question, or just Question. Like Stingray, this superhero first appeared in 1967, but isn't showcased very much anymore. Usually teaming up with the Blue Beetle, this superhero got his last solo series in 1987, lasting 36 issues. He originally had the secret identity of Vic Sage, but was later reimagined in the 2006-2007 miniseries 52, and his protege, Renee Montoya, takes over the mantle. This character is just a good old-fashioned fighter, only really having abilities in martial arts and I guess sleuthing since he's a journalist by trade, but he's just got such a simple and cool film noir kind of look, and it would be cool to see him in a lead role again. Again though, his abilities and look are strikingly similar to Marvel's Chameleon, so maybe by holding back on popularizing this character too much, they're just avoiding butting heads with their competitors. Once again, it's hard to tell.
Number 7. Earth 6799, 1967 Spider-Man cartoon. Bouncing off that happy little lovely tale, we have Earth 6799, or just Earth 67, which is actually the Earth where the 1967 Spider-Man takes place. Because of that, this Earth technically first appeared in Spider-Man Episode 1 Season 1 on September 9th, 1967. Its comic book appearance first comes in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, number 9, as one of the many alternate Spider-Man featured in this story. He also shows up in Spider-Verse Team-Up issue number 2 when Miles Morales and Peter Parker come to this Earth to find Spider-Man and recruit him to the fight against the Inheritors. It's super entertaining.
At number 6, we have DC's Dr. Fate. This guy is old. He first appeared in More Fun Comics number 55 in 1940 and basically hasn't been mentioned again since his death in the Book of Fate number 1 in 1997. So yes, that's a long run, but still I'd like to see more of him. Dr. Fate is a superhero that's got so much going on and looks so cool that I don't know why he isn't used more often these days. His powers come from an incident when he, Kent Nelson, and his father were uncovering the tomb of ancient immortal Nabu, and Kent is basically trained by the ancient being and awarded with the Amulet of Nabu, a cloak, and a helmet. With the training and these items in his control, he has abilities ranging from magic manipulation and flight to invisibility, super strength, and resurrection, among others. It's just a really cool character based on real ancient myth, and I don't see any reason why Dr. Fate shouldn't have another comeback soon.
Number 5. Punisher. Probably one of the most iconic when it comes to the idea of what an anti-hero is. Frank Castle was also one of the first. It's likely because of him as well that the idea of seeking revenge became a somewhat dark one. The Punisher's main quest is to get vengeance, not just for himself, but for others whom he thinks deserve it. Originally, he turned to a life of vigilantism after the death of his family, who happened to be on a picnic at the wrong place, the wrong time, and were witnesses to something they shouldn't have been. As such, they were eliminated by the mob. Despite also being shot, Frank survived the attack, though the rest of his family died, and as a result, he swore revenge. He is also known for being an overly violent hero who fights with guns, which is something most heroes look down upon, preferring to use non-lethal force. The Punisher would achieve next-level anti-hero status when he also became the first anti-hero to kill the entire Marvel Universe in 1995, in Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe, paving the way for another popular anti-hero, Deadpool, to also do so years later. Of course, it would take Deadpool until the 2000s before that would even be a thing for him. The 2010s, as it were, actually.
At number 4, we have Zeta from Batman Beyond, and eventually the Zeta Project cartoon spin-off. The show ran from 2001 to 2002 as part of a spin-off to the Batman Beyond episode Zeta. This character is so wholesome and doesn't get enough attention, having been last seen 20 years ago in what would have been the final episode of the short-running series. This synthoid was built for the NSA to keep an eye on terrorist organizations, so his abilities are pretty extensive, being able to shapeshift into just about about anyone to infiltrate and carry out covert ops with ease. He's a naive and friendly character who decides to go rogue after realizing that any one of his assassination targets could be innocent. Zeta had such a moment and clearly a huge approval rating since his one episode got him a whole series, but at a certain point, the world forgot about such a good and powerful synthoid superhero that definitely deserves a comeback.
Number 3. Earth 90214, Marvel Noir. In this alternate version of Earth, superheroes debuted in the 1920s and 30s instead of their normal timing. This Earth 90214 brought us Marvel Noir, with subsequent noir versions of Punisher, Wolverine, Iron Man, Daredevil, Luke Cage, the X-Men, and most famously, Spider-Man. Each story is a fresh, unique, and awesome take on each character, seeing how superpowers in this world are pretty much non-existent except for a few characters. For example, Spider-Man was bitten by a spider, but instead of being based in science, his powers derived from a spider god. Or Wolverine didn't actually have claws, he just carries like brass knuckle blade things. Another example would be the X-Men, who are actually a group of sociopathic criminals, led by an Xavier who believed sociopathy was the future of the human species, which is just incredible.
Okay, at number 2 on the list, we've got Komodo. This superhero really was a flash in the pan, only appearing on and off for a few years and having her legacy end with her powers being stripped. For a time, until they're restored again by Cloud9 and Hardball, but that's sort of it. And I think the last time she's been seen is in the Fear Itself storyline, which wrapped up in 2011, which is 11 years ago now, believe it or not. But this character needs to reappear in some way. The superhero was first created because Melody Kusama lost her leg in a serious car accident, and none other than Dr. Connors from, yes, the Spider-Man series, decides to endow her with the regenerative powers of a lizard. Well, not only that, of course, she actually turns into a lizard fully and at will and gains super strength, speed, agility, stamina, all that good stuff. I think this story is a good one to retell because who doesn't love a good story where someone confined to a wheelchair is able to not only walk again, but fight crime and be pretty damn good at it. Okay, last on the list is just my personal favorite, arguably obscure superhero 3D Man. An athlete turned superhero, 3D Man mysteriously gained superpowers after being stripped of his 3 Olympic gold medals. I mean, he was taking steroids, but there's always room for redemption, right? This character first appeared in 1998 and no one ever really talks about him. And to be honest, I didn't even know he existed until I started writing this list. And I want this hero to get more spotlight primarily because I'm a sucker for early 2000s culture, and this character is just such a great time capsule for that period, where everybody was obsessed with 3D for some reason, with DVDs coming with 3D glasses in the case, remember that? And 3D Man has the same nostalgic look to him, with many of his appearances being colored in green and red. If you want to look him up yourself, you'll notice that he originally went by the name of Triathlon and later changed to 3D Man during the Secret Invasion storyline. This guy just looks so cool and hits home with some good nostalgia for me, as well as probably anyone from the Gen Z or millennial generations. And there's also just a silly factor there too. 3D Man needs to come back. Please, can we? Just for 1 second.
Number 10, Hero for Hire / Power Man. That's right, while Black Panther was one of the first superheroes of color to appear in comics, Luke Cage's Power Man would actually beat him when it came to having his own comic series. This series was originally titled Hero for Hire, but the name would later be changed starting with issue 17 to Power Man. The first issue of Hero for Hire came out in June of 1971, and Black Panther wouldn't get his own series until 1977. I know, strange, right? The name for Luke Cage's series would change one more time starting with issue number 50, becoming Power Man and Iron Fist. That name would stick with the series from issue 86 till its end in issue number 125. Number 9, The Amazing Spider-Man. When many people think of Marvel Comics, this is often the hero they think of first. The first volume of Amazing Spider-Man would see its very first issue come out in March of 1963, and the first issue was very much an origin story, one that we'd become all too familiar with in the animated series and films to follow about everyone's favorite Spidey-themed hero, Peter Parker's Spider-Man. The series would be a long-standing one and would produce hundreds of issues, and although it has been relaunched, the story of Peter Parker continues to be one that comic book fans everywhere have become obsessed with, making Spider-Man one of the biggest superheroes, especially one of the biggest superheroes to come out of Marvel Comics. Number 8, Fantastic Four. The Human Torch was actually the first character to appear from the Fantastic Four in Marvel Comics number 1 in 1939. Sort of anyways. Marvel Comics was an anthology magazine comprised of various heroes' adventure shorts. I know, I said no anthologies, but I think this is a pretty cool fact. The Human Torch that actually first appeared in Marvel Comics was actually Jim Hammond. Hammond would later be reinvented in the Fantastic Four team as Johnny Storm, Sue's brother. So the character, while different, is even older than the Fantastic Four comics itself, which is still pretty old, although granted that Human Torch wasn't obviously the same as the Human Torch that we have now. The Fantastic Four series started in 1961 with issue 1, which like Spider-Man's start was also an origin story. Watch out for those cosmic rays, or maybe don't, if you want superpowers. Number 7. Tonto. You didn't think I was going to talk about Lone Ranger and just like leave Tonto out of this list, did you? Tonto was originally shown as Lone Ranger's native partner and was part of the Comanche tribe originally. Some may think of him as just a sidekick, but as time progressed his character tended to be more presented as an equal and partner to the Lone Ranger rather than just a sidekick. He got his own comic book spin-off series in the 50s titled The Lone Ranger's Companion Tonto, and was often depicted as being witty and sarcastic, even going on to mock other less favorable portrayals of himself in pop culture that made him seem more savage. I like when heroic characters are self-aware and sassy like that. I feel it. Deadpool, She-Hulk, Tonto. Keep being sassy, keep being witty. Number 6. Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman would get her own series in 1942, shortly after her appearance in All-Star Comics issue number 8. The first issue even introduced a female associate editor of the magazine, Alice Marble. Marble was known as an acclaimed tennis player. While her time on the DC staff editorial board was brief, she was also a self-proclaimed fan of Wonder Woman, who was responsible during her time with DC for the Wonder Woman of History feature in the comic, which retold the stories of real-life famous historical women. Wonder Woman's first story involved her saving Steve Trevor, and introduced us to the world of the Amazons. Apparently, Amazons liked riding kangaroos around originally. Did you know that? At least they look like kangaroos, I don't know. Giant kangaroos, we ride them in combat. I wonder when horses became a thing in these comics. I need to read more old Wonder Woman, because it seems like a time.
Number 5. Hybrid. Have you ever wondered what would happen if 4 symbiotes merged together? Well, that is exactly what Hybrid is. Hybrid is Riot, Phage, Lasher, and Agony merged into one. All 4 of their hosts were killed by their sibling Scream. Hybrid merged with Scott Washington, who was a guardsman at the prison The Vault, where all 4 of them were actually being held. Now, Scott ended up realizing these 4 symbiotes weren't actually all that evil, and that the experiments that were being done on them were actually causing them like a great deal of pain. So, he decided to free them, and he got fired for it. They eventually bonded with him, and because of that, Scott actually regained the ability to walk. You see, years earlier there was a shooting that killed his brother and left him paralyzed. He wanted to go after the people that caused this and kill them, but get this, the symbiotes actually told him not to do it. They didn't actually want to kill anyone. So they ended up finding the people responsible and handing them over to the authorities. You see, not all symbiotes are bad. Also, since there were 4 different symbiotes merged into one, Scott had to deal with 4 different personalities. Man, that would be an experience, hearing all those voices in your head. Probably make you go a bit crazy.
Number 4. Captain Marvel Adventures. Captain Marvel Adventures was the spin-off from Whiz Comics, an anthology series that featured the ever-popular Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel Adventures was the original series for the hero, produced by Fawcett Publications. Alright, let's get into the craziness of Fawcett, here we go. Fawcett would end up cancelling the series and all other superhero series eventually as a result of the lawsuit filed against them in regards to Captain Marvel's similarity to Superman, who had belonged to National Periodical Publications at the time the lawsuit was filed in the 1940s. Still, Captain Marvel Adventures would go on to have 150 issues before it was cancelled in the 1950s. National Periodical Publication would later evolve and merge into the famous comic book publisher that we know today as DC Comics. And as Fawcett was closing up shop, DC would end up picking up the rights for Captain Marvel, aka Billy Batson, in the 1970s. Captain Marvel under DC would eventually evolve to become Shazam, originally the name of the magician who gave Billy his powers in his origin story in Whiz Comics. Although later that magician would have a different name, have no name, all sorts of crazy stuff. The name change happened after Marvel Comics sued DC for rights to the name in regards to their own separate Captain Marvel, who first appeared in the Marvel Superhero series in 1967. Oh, comic book characters and lawsuits. Woo! I hope that clarified some of that crazy lawsuit stuff for you, or made it more confusing. Either way, I hope you learned something. Number 3. The Phantom. The Phantom originated in comic strip form, where so many superheroes were originally born. He was created by Lee Falk. The Phantom actually introduced the idea of a costumed adventurer to American comic books. Before that, we didn't really have people in like tight spandex running around. While the Phantom, aka Kit Walker, found popularity in comic strips in the US, his comics didn't quite shine so bright. Internationally, however, the character seemed seemed to do much better, becoming a hit in Australia, Sweden, and Papua New Guinea. He also was originally from a fictional country in Africa, so no wonder he did well in Papua New Guinea. I feel like they were like, I can see some similarities here. Number 2. Batman. After making his first appearance in the Detective Comics series in issue 27, Batman would shortly after get his own series and go on to be one of the most iconic heroes in comic book history, and obviously one of my favorites. The first issue of Batman came out in March of 1940. It featured an origin story and introduced us to Batman characters who would go on to become some of the most famous, including Robin, James Gordon, Joe Chill, Hugo Strange, Catwoman, and Batman's one true supervillain, the Joker. Number 1. Superman. Superman first appeared in the anthology series Action Comics, and like Batman, he would soon after get a series to call his own. Superman Volume 1 Issue 1 would come out in June of 1939, almost a full year before his future BFF and fellow JLA member Batman. Superman's first issue was the typical origin story fare, but as soon as issue 2, we would also find ourselves introduced to some of Superman's mainstays, mostly in the way of supporting characters. In issue 2, we would meet both Superman's young pal Jimmy Olsen and his future girlfriend slash wife slash baby mama Lois Lane. Slash sometimes she's superwoman herself. That's also happened. Oh, Lois Lane. She's a pretty cool lady. Number 10. Helena Wayne as Huntress. Before Helena Bertinelli was Huntress, we had Helena Wayne. Helena Wayne was the daughter of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle, Batman and Catwoman respectively. Although she didn't come from a crime family, she was still heavily trained by her parents, and eventually took up the mantle Huntress as a vigilante. Like the main continuity Huntress, she was also known for being more violent than was considered acceptable. After her mother's death, she moved out and blaming the criminal Silky Cernak for her mother's death, as he had blackmailed Selina into returning to a life of crime as Catwoman, Helena Wayne set out for revenge. Catwoman died when she returned to her life of crime. No. Mom, why? Number 9. Venom. Venom would technically make its first appearance in issue 252 of volume 1 of the Amazing Spider-Man series, but it wouldn't be until almost 50 issues later in issue 299 that the suit would develop a mind of its own, or well, bind its own mind with that of Eddie Brock's mind, and be introduced to us again as Venom. Once Eddie had got his hands on the suit, he began to plot sweet, sweet revenge on Peter Parker. But during his first appearance, Peter, who was also rocking a black and white suit at the time, albeit not the symbiotic one, I know, confusing, was not at home, so instead, Venom ran into MJ in her and Peter's apartment, scaring her senseless. Eddie would go on to terrorize Peter, but the two would at times reluctantly team up to take on even bigger bads, as despite being kind of a bad guy, Eddie had sort of a moral code. He definitely didn't like to kill innocent civilians and tried to avoid that when possible, though also he sometimes did that. The two teamed up to take on villains like Carnage, and eventually Eddie would become a hero in his own right. He's probably got one of the best story arcs in comics because of his gradual transformation since his introduction as Venom in '88, from complete villain to, well, complete anti-hero. Maybe even like full-on hero now. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is Venom a full hero yet? Can we go there? Number 8. John Constantine. Constantine made his first appearance in Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 37. He is known as an occult detective from England who likes to do things his own way. He's somewhat violent and reckless, with somewhat of a disregard for the smaller things. To John, sometimes you have to break a few eggs or sacrifice a few souls to make an omelet. And as long as it's for the greater good, he's sometimes fine with that. In his own series Hellblazer, which started in 1988 and ran for over 300 issues, the original tone of the series was quite dark, because the series also came out as part of DC's Vertigo line, which was known for being one of the darkest imprints that DC ever had. Of course, sadly, Vertigo is no more, but in its place we now have the stunning DC Black Label, so I guess it's fine. Just kidding. DC Black Label's really awesome. But still, can't we have both? Can't we have both DC?
Okay, at number 7 we've got Marvel's Dominic Fortune, or Dominic Fortunov. This character is not only old in terms of his first appearance in the comics, but the character himself is aged to the point where it's known to be one of his biggest weaknesses. First appearing in Marvel Preview number 2 in 1975, this superhero needs a comeback for the sole reason that he's just a guy. He doesn't have any powers, but fought in World War II II and always seems to be getting caught up in assassination attempts and weird odd jobs. Like one time when he had to babysit 3 drunken actors in Hollywood for a weekend and had to call the cops on them after things got out of hand. And after that, Fortune actually gets recruited to the Avengers by Nick Fury in 1959. He's just a good old-fashioned human superhero who runs into human troubles and stays in his lane, but ends up getting the opportunity still to support the superpowered Avengers with bazooka blasts and covert ops.
Number 6. Black Cat. Black Cat was first introduced in The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 issue 194 as a thief, and she continued to be that for quite a while, but she was also introduced as a love interest for Spider-Man at the same time, which she would also continue to be for some time. Distracting Spidey with a kiss, she was able to get away with the goods she needed and succeeded in breaking her dad out of jail as a result. Though we wouldn't learn her dad's connection to her until the next issue. Being a mysterious figure with self-serving motives has always left her painted as an anti-hero, even when she has heroic intentions at heart. Although Felicia Hardy has played both sides before as well, being a full-on hero and a full-on criminal at times.
Number 5. Earth 15513, 1872. Technically, Earth 15513 is Battleworld, which is actually part of the modern Secret Wars story. The pocket dimension of the Valley of Doom is made of another Earth's version of the Wild West, mainly the town of Timely. Timely is run by its mayor, Wilson Fisk, and his enforcers, who ultimately answer to Governor Roxxon. Stephen Rogers is the sheriff in this here town, and he's a bitter but just man after the death of his deputy, Bucky Barnes. Anthony Stark is the town drunk, regretful of how his weapons were used in the Civil War. Natasha Romanoff is the widow of Bucky, with Bruce Banner being the doctor of the town. The new hero, Red Wolf, tries blowing up the Roxxon Dam, which almost results in his lynching, if it weren't for Sheriff Stephen Rogers, who saves him. Conflict blossoms when the agents of Roxxon, Bullseye, Grizzly, Elektra, and Dr. Octopus arrive in town and start running amok. Another story you have to read. I promise the steampunk-looking Iron Man will not disappoint you.
Number 4. Wolverine. Logan, being considered a little more rough around the edges and animalistic, is what quickly granted him an anti-hero status. As far as superheroes go, he was different. He made his first full appearance in The Incredible Hulk Volume 1 issue 181. Since the beginning, his violent nature and broodiness has made him both well-loved by fans, but sometimes disliked by other heroes. He also has less hang-ups when it comes to killing people, even suggesting at times that it's the best course of action when dealing with villains, and having a pretty big thing for mercy killing when it comes to other heroes. This has also made Logan one of the biggest anti-heroes in the X-Men world. He just kills tons of people. People will be like, I think I'm gonna die, and he's like, I got you, don't worry. I'll make it quick.
At number 3, there's Warlord, a character the world hasn't seen since his death in Warlord Volume 4, Issue 12. But there should be some kind of revival of Travis Morgan, who is another character on the list who doesn't actually have any powers, but is just a very well-respected and decorated war veteran. He also looks a lot like Oliver Queen or Green Arrow, which could have had something to do with it. They sort of acknowledge this when they finally meet in the same comic, and all of the Seattle underworld mistake Warlord for Green Arrow and attack him on sight. But whatever the reason is, Warlord's legacy deserves to be acknowledged with another appearance of some kind. I mean, the lore behind the character is that in past lives he's been Sir Lancelot, D'Artagnan of the Three Musketeers, and Crazy Horse, among other legendary warriors and soldiers. He's just a great human character with, might I add, a really cool costume and some badass accolades to boot. Bring him back.
Number 2. Catwoman. Catwoman has always operated more on the edge of what's right and wrong since her introduction, which is part of the huge appeal when it comes to her, and has been part of a huge problem in regards to her on and off again relationship with Batman. Though Batman wasn't really a saint either when it came to his early days, but anyways. When Catwoman first appeared in Batman Volume 1 Issue Number 1, it was as a jewel thief, and Batman at the time was engaged to a woman named Julie. Still, he was tempted to join her and become her king of crime, but when he refused her, she managed to escape his clutches, sneaking away. Batman really hoped that he'd run into her again, despite her criminal tendencies, and despite the fact that he was was engaged, and his wish would eventually be granted. Catwoman would even team up with Batman and join him in his acts of heroism, though originally it would often be for her own motives alone, but she became more of a hero as time went on. Number 1. Namor. Namor is an interesting one. When he first debuted in Motion Picture Funnies Weekly, it was as a young prince attacking land dwellers, seeking revenge for his people. He would then go on to join the fight in World War II, fighting against Nazis with heroes such as Captain America. Later, he would forget who he was and only regain his memories when he was accidentally knocked into the ocean in the original Fantastic Four series by Johnny Storm. He would then rediscover who he was and that the kingdom that had been his underwater home had been destroyed by the Humans War's nuclear bomb tests, and as a result would attack the land, becoming a villain. Again. Since then, he has done a variety of good and not always so good things, but what remains constant is that Namor's methods have pretty much always been questionable. His return to being good, but in his own way, and still while thinking very highly of himself, made him an anti-hero. And while he is very passionate about protecting his people, there is no doubt that this means he would also do anything to safeguard Atlantis, regardless of how morally ambiguous or severe it might be.
Number 10. Lasher. Lasher was created when a company called the Life Foundation forcibly extracted 5 offspring from Venom. You see, during the Cold War, the Life Foundation believed that a nuclear holocaust was coming and wanted to create a superpowered police force to protect this new world or, utopia that they were creating. That's when they decided that a symbiote police force would probably be the best option. One of those 5 symbiotes was Lasher. Lasher merged with Ramon Hernandez and is known for his green color and the tentacles on his back, which, was his primary attack, and for the most part it was very effective. Number 9. Phage. Also one of the ones created because of the Life Foundation, Phage bonded with Karl Mack. Phage is known for his orange and black appearance and being able to mold his body into sharp blades, similar, to Carnage, which was effective against his opponents. He's also one of the larger symbiotes. He has a build that is very similar to Venom, which along with those blades would make, a really deadly combo. Number 8. Agony. Agony, also a Life Foundation creation, bonded with Leslie Jasnira. Agony was unique in that she was able to spit acid that could burn through almost anything. Agony also had the power to absorb and regurgitate chemicals. Oh god. That's so gross. She also had a very different look than her siblings. She was bright purple with hints of black and had wavy hair. Of course, she also had sharp teeth and massive claws.
Number 7. The Flash. Starting us off with Barry Allen's Flash, this series had hundreds of issues as well, though not quite as many as the Amazing Spider-Man series. It all started in March of 1959 with issue 105. While that might seem like an odd number to start on, it was because the series was picked up by DC Comics after All American Publications cancelled its predecessor, a series known as Flash Comics, which featured predominantly the adventures of the Flash and Hawkman. DC Comics actually was kind of once All American Publications. DC was the phoenix that rose out of the ashes of a few different comic book publishers who came together to create DC, of which All American was one. And then later, that original Flash 2 from Flash Comics, Jay Garrick, would also become part of our continuity. Fun fact. Jay Garrick was one of the few Flashes that actually got to retire, post to die, or go back into the Speed Force, or any of that fun stuff.
Number 6. Scream. Can I get created because of Life Foundation for 500? Oh, thank you. Scream ended up bonding with human Donna Diego. Scream's color scheme is also very unique, at least for symbiotes. Scream is yellow and black. Also, it is believed that Scream is the strongest of the symbiotes that were extracted from Venom. The reason being is that even though, she was eventually defeated, she took out and killed the host of the other 4 symbiotes that were created by the Life Foundation. Scream also used her long, flowing hair as a weapon, whipping it and slicing her foes.
Number 5. Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. You might be wondering just where Wonder Woman is on this list, but Sheena actually predates Wonder Woman, and her own self-titled series even predates Wonder Woman's by a few months. She was originally published by Fiction Comics and was known as Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. Most 1930s Queen of the Jungle I have ever seen, but yet. Sheena's abilities included super strength and agility, and the ability to communicate with animals. She made her first appearance in WAG Comics issue number 1, and her self-titled series came out in early 1942, just a few months before Wonder Woman. Only a few months. So close, so close.
Number 4. All Black the Necrosword. Alright, so this one isn't technically an old symbiote, but it is the oldest symbiote. You get it? You know what I mean? Okay, what I mean by that is, even though it was introduced in Thor God of Thunder #2 in 2013, it was revealed that it is technically the oldest symbiote ever created. It was primarily used by Gore the God Butcher. It was so powerful that it could kill gods and celestial beings, and every time it did kill them, it took their blood and got even stronger. It instantly became a fan favorite, and because of it, we got one of the most popular Thor stories ever written. And, fun fact, it has also been used by Galactus to destroy worlds. I mean, the thing is insanely powerful.
Number 3. Captain America Comics. Captain America was one of the first Marvel heroes to get his own series. Captain America Comics was the original name of the series, and its first issue came out in March of 1941. Unsurprisingly, the cover features Cap punching Hitler in the face, pretty much establishing what kind of hero Steve Rogers would be from day one. The kind of guy that likes to punch Nazis in the face. That's his thing. That was his thing anyways. Then he got frozen in some ice, then he woke up, did some other stuff. You know how it goes.
Number 2. Carnage. Carnage is the first child of Venom. Carnage is all red and is one of the most powerful and terrifying symbiotes around. Seriously, this guy is what nightmares are made of. And to make matters worse, he bonded with a serial killer, Cletus Cassidy, who we will finally see in live action for the very first time this year in Sony's Venom 2. I mean, fingers crossed it turns out well. I'm really hoping. Okay, but back to the comics. Carnage was created when Venom left behind his offspring in the prison where Eddie Brock was being held. This new symbiote offspring made its way to Eddie's cellmate, Cletus. Cletus then broke out of prison and began murdering a ton of people. No surprise there. Carnage also went on to become one of Spider-Man's greatest foes. Number 1. Venom. The original symbiote. While he may not be the strongest or technically the oldest, Venom is still considered to be the best by a lot of fans. There's a reason people have grown to love symbiotes so much, and it all has to do with this guy. He was first introduced when he bonded with Peter Parker, giving him, the famous black suit. Although, fans weren't instantly happy with Spider-Man's new look. It did become a lot more famous and well liked as time went on. They eventually did make him change back to his, good old red and blue spandex. And the alien symbiote found its way to another host, Eddie Brock. Fans just couldn't get enough of Venom, and to this day, he is regarded as one of the greatest Spider-Man villains of all time. I mean, the guy had his own film in 2018 and it grossed over $856 million at the worldwide box office. And that was with a mixed response. Not a lot of villains could do that. Number 10. Lasher. Lasher was created when a company called the Life Foundation forcibly extracted 5 offspring from Venom. You see, during the Cold War, the Life Foundation believed that a nuclear holocaust was coming and wanted to create a superpowered police force to protect this new world or, utopia that they were creating. That's when they decided that a symbiote police force would probably be the best option. One of those 5 symbiotes was Lasher. Lasher merged with Ramon Hernandez and is known for his green color and the tentacles on his back, which, was his primary attack, and for the most part, it was very effective. Number 9. Phage. Also one of the ones created because of the Life Foundation, Phage bonded with Karl Mack. Phage is known for his orange and black appearance and being able to mold his body into sharp blades, similar, to Carnage, which was effective against his opponents. He's also one of the larger symbiotes. He has a build that is very similar to Venom, which along with those blades would make, a really deadly combo. Number 8. Agony. Agony, also a Life Foundation creation, bonded with Leslie Jasnira. Agony was unique in that she was able to spit acid that could burn through almost anything. Agony also had the power to absorb and regurgitate chemicals. Oh god. That's so gross. She also had a very different look than her siblings. She was bright purple with hints of black and had wavy hair. Of course, she also had sharp teeth and massive claws. Number 7. Riot. Riot is, well you guessed it, another symbiote created because of the Life Foundation. Riot bonded with Trevor Cole, who was a mercenary. Riot took on a very similar appearance to Venom. His build, size, and color scheme were all very similar. He's also considered to be the most violent of the Life Foundation creations. Riot is also the only one of his siblings to make a live action appearance, so far. He was the main antagonist in the 2018 film Venom. Now, in the film, he didn't actually merge with Trevor Cole, instead he went with the head of the Life Foundation, Carlton Drake. Who knows? Maybe we'll see some of Riot's siblings in future films. Number 6. Scream. Can I get created because of Life Foundation for 500? Oh, thank you. Scream ended up bonding with human Donna Diego. Scream's color scheme is also very unique, at least for symbiotes. Scream is yellow and black. Also, it is believed that Scream is the strongest of the symbiotes that were extracted from Venom. The reason being is that even though, she was eventually defeated, she took out and killed the host of the other 4 symbiotes that were created by the Life Foundation. Scream also used her long, flowing hair as a weapon, whipping it and slicing her foes. Number 5. Hybrid. Have you ever wondered what would happen if 4 symbiotes merged together? Well, that is exactly what Hybrid is. Hybrid is Riot, Phage, Lasher, and Agony merged into one. All 4 of their hosts were killed by their sibling Scream. Hybrid merged with Scott Washington, who was a guardsman at the prison The Vault, where all 4 of them were actually being held. Now, Scott ended up realizing these 4 symbiotes weren't actually all that evil, and that the experiments that were being done on them were actually causing them a great deal of pain. So, he decided to free them, and he got fired for it. They eventually bonded with him, and because of that, Scott actually regained the ability to walk. You see, years earlier there was a shooting that killed his brother and left him paralyzed. He wanted to go after the people that caused this and kill them, but get this, the symbiotes actually told him not to do it. They didn't actually want to kill anyone. So they ended up finding the people responsible and handing them over to the authorities. You see, not all symbiotes are bad. Also, since there were 4 different symbiotes merged into one, Scott had to deal with 4 different personalities. Man, that would be an experience. Hearing all those voices in your head, probably make you go a bit crazy. Number 4, All Black the Necrosword. Alright, so this one isn't technically an old symbiote, but it is the oldest symbiote. You get it? You know what I mean? Okay, what I mean by that is, even though it was introduced in Thor God of Thunder number 2 in 2013, it was revealed that it is technically the oldest symbiote ever created. It was primarily used by Gore the God Butcher. It was so powerful that it could kill gods and celestial beings, and every time it did kill them, it took their blood and got even stronger. It instantly became a fan favorite, and because of it, we got one of the most popular Thor stories ever written. And, fun fact, it has also been used by Galactus to destroy worlds. I mean, the thing is insanely powerful. Number 3, Toxin. Toxin is one of the newer ones on this list, but of course, that doesn't mean he's actually really new. Toxin debuted all the way back in 2004. Now, since all symbiotes create their offspring alone, they don't actually need to mate with one another. This eventually ends up happening to Carnage. Now, Carnage was naturally worried because each offspring is said to be stronger than their predecessor. Because of that, Carnage was ready to kill it as soon as it was born. Good old Carnage. When Toxin was born, Carnage just couldn't kill it. He did try, but Toxin was just already too powerful, and it ended up bonding with Patrick Mulligan, an NYPD officer. Toxin is also red and has a slim spider-like appearance when he was bonded with Patrick, but later on he ended up bonding with Eddie Brock and grew to be a lot bigger and way scarier. He also has an amazing healing factor and is more resistant to sound and heat than most other symbiotes. Number 2, Carnage. Carnage is the first child of Venom. Carnage is all red and is one of the most powerful and terrifying symbiotes around. Seriously, this guy is what nightmares are made of. And to make matters worse, he bonded with a serial killer, Cletus Cassidy, who we will finally see in live action for the very first time this year in Sony's Venom 2. I mean, fingers crossed it turns out well. I'm really hoping. Okay, but back to the comics. Carnage was created when Venom left behind his offspring in the prison where Eddie Brock was being held. This new symbiote offspring made its way to Eddie's cellmate, Cletus. Cletus then broke out of prison and began murdering a ton of people. No surprise there. Carnage also went on to become one of Spider-Man's greatest foes. Number 1, Venom. The original symbiote. While he may not be the strongest or technically the oldest, Venom is still considered to be the best by a lot of fans. There's a reason people have grown to love symbiotes so much, and it all has to do with this guy. He was first introduced when he bonded with Peter Parker, giving him, the famous black suit. Although, fans weren't instantly happy with Spider-Man's new look. It did become a lot more famous and well liked as time went on. They eventually did make him change back to his, good old red and blue spandex. And the alien symbiote found its way to another host, Eddie Brock. Fans just couldn't get enough of Venom, and to this day, he is regarded as one of the greatest Spider-Man villains of all time. I mean, the guy had his own film in 2018 and it grossed over $856 million at the worldwide box office. And that was with a mixed response. Not a lot of villains could do that.
And for this list, starting off at number 10 is Magneto. Starting off this list with the absolute GOAT. Magneto has been around for a long time, and a majority of that time, he was a villain, or at best, an anti-hero. As the #1 rival of Professor Charles Xavier, Magneto's view of the world is Pretty interesting given that he was the child of a Jewish family during World War II, and yet, after years of persecution for being a mutant, he believed his race to be superior to regular humans nonetheless, and that humans should be subservient or destroyed. Under this mentality, he led the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants as well as other groups against the X-Men and the Earth's heroes. Now everybody knows that Magneto is not someone you mess with. He has enough power and enough experience to stomp almost anyone. For example, while he has become more of just a hero nowadays, there's a point where he gets his heart ripped out by a villain called Uranos. But he keeps himself alive by using his powers to keep his blood flowing. He's just that insanely powerful. But being born around World War II and the rival to Charles Xavier, he's been up there in the age department since he was introduced, but always manages to decimate his enemies. Number 9. Cassandra Nova. Sticking with X-related heroes, we have the evil twin, or counterpart, or anti-self to Charles Xavier. Cassandra Nova isn't really a mutant, but she isn't really a person either. She is actually what is known as a Mumadrai, the spirit that is equal to the opposite of a person. Wrap your head around that one. This is about to get wild, so buckle up. Because of the genetic mutant potential of Charles Xavier, his Mumadrai was able to create a physical form for itself when Sharon Xavier was pregnant with Charles, making Cassandra basically Xavier's twin. Now Charles, even as a baby, sensed Cassandra as an evil presence, and he used his psychic abilities to try and take her out in the womb. Cassandra survived though, and so she spent decades as this terrifying mass of cells in a sewer, building herself a new body and planning her revenge on her brother. Cassandra has all the same telepathic powers as Charles himself, plus some telekinetic abilities as well. But being a Mumadrai, she has the terrifying ability to manipulate DNA, breaking it down, copying it, and being able to construct physical bodies. She can even phase through solid objects, regenerate insanely fast, and enhance and evolve other mutant abilities. Number 8. Granny Goodness. Stepping away from Marvel for a moment, Granny Goodness is probably the complete opposite of anything we would describe as goodness. She was originally one of the lowlies, which is basically the peasant class on DC Universe's Apocalypse. From a younger age, she was taken by Darkseid and raised and trained to become head of the Shock Troops and the Female Furies. She has the responsibility to bring young warriors from other worlds to fight each other to earn the right to be trained by her. But Granny Goodness also has multiple orphanages where she both trains and disciplines younger individuals looking for potential warriors for Darkseid. Now being a resident of Apocalypse, Granny here does have quite a bit of power. She has superhuman strength, speed, durability, and senses, as well as invulnerability and an advanced immune system and immortality. But being immortal doesn't necessarily save you from looking old as hell, which is why we get Granny Goodness.
Number 7. Skrulls. That's right, Skrulls are some of the oldest villains around. Did you know that? I know, it's pretty surprising. Although they aren't exactly considered clean-cut villains anymore, they have even teamed up with Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, before to help save the universe. Originally, however, the Skrulls appeared in Fantastic Four Volume 1 Issue 2, and were hell-bent on invading Earth. This was right after the FF team had been introduced, which was basically all that issue 1 was about, an origin story. The Skrulls knew that the FF were the main protectors of Earth, despite the fact that they'd sort of just started their superhero career, which is kinda weird. Anyways, they decided to impersonate the FF, commit a bunch of villainous deeds while impersonating them in order to frame them and have Earth's military capture and kill the Fantastic Four team, so that the Skrulls might then invade Earth with no one powerful enough to put a stop to them. Of course, this plan was foiled when the FF trapped the imposters, unmasked them as Skrulls, and ended up posing as those Skrulls to tell the Skrull leader that Earth's defenses were too powerful for the invasion to succeed, thus scaring them off. Basically, they defeated an entire Skrull invasion in that comic, so that's pretty impressive. The Skrulls that originally posed as the Fantastic Four members were forced to stay behind after the invasion left, because obviously the Fantastic Four was not going to let them go back up onto that ship. So they then decided to take the form of cows and continue to live on Earth in apparent peace. Peaceful cows. Apparently they'd rather be anything but Skrulls. so they said in the comic, which I thought, oh, it's kind of like rude. I'm sure there are Skrulls that really like being Skrulls. Ugh.
Number 6. Old Loki from the MCU. Alright, I'm going to step away from the pages of comic books altogether here. During the MCU's Loki show, Loki gets sent to the Void, where the whole place is basically filled with other alternate versions of himself. But he specifically became part of a group of 4 other Lokis: Boastful Loki, Alligator Loki, Kid Loki, and the topic for today, Classic Loki. Classic Loki had a similar story to regular Loki from the Sacred Timeline, but when confronted by Thanos in Avengers Infinity War, this Loki decided to use duplication magic to survive the whole thing. He then spent a hell of a long time on a remote planet, ashamed of the nefarious things he had done over time. When he finally tried to return to see his brother, Thor, who he missed, he was an older man, and them meeting caused a divergent timeline, getting himself pruned and sent to the Void. He has probably one of the best moments in the show. When Sylvie, Loki, and Mobius try to escape from the Void, and the reality-consuming Alioth tries to stop them, Classic Loki uses his magic to create a true-to-life, massive illusion of Asgard itself, all while this weird version of Ride of the Valkyries was playing in the background, distracting Alioth and giving me just straight-up goosebumps. Like, I am actually getting them right now just thinking about it. Like, it was such a cool moment. Satisfying. Number 5. Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul was born around 700 years ago, and thanks to the Lazarus Pits, he has been able to keep his body in working order. But he discovered the pits when he was an older gentleman and keeps the look of someone with a significant amount of years to him. After he came in contact with the pits, he eventually became a master martial artist and a master fencer, gaining a massive amount of wealth, and he started creating organizations to rid the world of crime, with his first being called the Demon, which the later League of Assassins is a branch of. Rage's purpose within the League of Assassins is to eliminate all evil in the world by destroying all of humanity and just starting all over. Obviously, that mentality means he routinely has run-ins with the superhero community, especially Batman, who he helped train. Rage has had many plans over the years that tried to destroy the world, and he has also beaten the entire JLA when he discovered Batman's notes. Now, with his years of experience and his vast amount of accumulated resources, this older fellow is a massive threat to both the heroes and the world. Number 4. The Joker. During the absolutely fantastic 3 Jokers storyline, we learn there have actually been 3 Jokers plaguing Gotham over the years, and among the 3 of them is the Golden Age Joker, and he is clearly much older than the other 2. Now, to be completely transparent here, whether this story is canon or not is an area of debate, so it's up to you if this one counts. But the Golden Age Joker, known as the Criminal, is the only one of the 3 Jokers to be a predominantly serious crime lord, and he even says that laughing and smiling is physically painful for him. Another thing that makes this entry a little arguable is that of these 3 Jokers, we don't know which one, if any of them, is the Joker. Even if only one remains in the end, the best part of this story is the uncertainty about which one is the one who started it all. Now, seeing as the Criminal is the oldest, classic version, he seems to be the one who started it all, creating more Jokers to mess with Batman. But the other 2 Jokers have been featured in incredibly important Batman stories as well. The comic really explores all of it, and if you haven't yet, make sure you check out Batman 3 Jokers as soon as possible. Number 3. Maestro. The Incredible Hulk has certainly been through the ringer in his decorated career, but few versions of the character are the living embodiment of that fact, like the Maestro. An alternate version of Bruce Banner from an apocalyptic future, this version of the character is far more intense and complex, but also much older. The best way to explain Maestro is to say that he is basically a smarter, older, villainous version of Dr. Bruce Banner, with all the powers and abilities of the original, but with a touch of nuclear radiation. He has much more of a cosmic and spiritual side to him than the normal Hulk does, but he is also twice as strong as Hulk is, and he retains all the intelligence of Bruce Banner, but with years and years more experience. Despite all that extra strength, brain power, and experience, he still gets outmaneuvered by the Hulk, who sends Maestro back in time to the site of the Gamma Bomb that created them. But even then, the Maestro's spirit remains on the bones left behind after the explosion went off and he came back back to life. Number 2. Agatha Harkness. Like a few of these villains, when we first met Agatha Harkness in Fantastic Four number 94 from October of 1969, she was already elderly. She started out as the nanny for the newly born Franklin Richards, and using her magical powers, she even saved the Fantastic Four from the Frightful Four and a handful of other villains, and also helped Franklin when his powers first started to emerge. But she went on to have an interesting relationship with the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff, but also her mother, Natalia Maximoff. That's because this sweet nanny Agatha is actually an incredibly ancient sorcerer who was around to remember the sinking of Atlantis nearly 18,000 years ago. And she was probably the most powerful of the original witches during the Salem witch trials, an event that she actually supported as she thought it would cull the weak magic users who held them back. Agatha, like a lot of older villains, is pretty damn complex. She has helped out heroes on multiple occasions, but she's also done some pretty sinister stuff. But there's no doubt that she is much stronger than both heroes and villains first assume. Number 1. Baron von Strucker. Baron Wolfgang von Strucker was born in the 19th century, so he ain't a young fella by any means. He fought with the Axis powers during World War II alongside and under the Red Skull. He was a top villain at the time, not just for Captain America, but more prominently as an adversary for Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos. And that carried through after the war ended, as Strucker was instrumental in the rise of Hydra and then became the Supreme Hydra. He was even responsible for the corruption of S.H.I.E.L.D., using Hydra to completely take over large parts of S.H.I.E.L.D. itself. When Captain America returned, and then the Red Skull did as well, Strucker began to lose his leadership role within Hydra, and so he faked his own passing, choosing to instead manipulate events from the shadows. Eventually though, Strucker got the Death Spore virus, which is why he is on this list. He's old, and many people don't know he has this particular enhancement. While he is an excellent strategist, a highly intelligent, exceptional hand-to-hand combatant, swordsman and marksman who uses Hydra tech to live longer and be in top physical condition, the Death Spore virus bonded Strucker's DNA with the Death Spore itself, enabling him to be revived after passing away. He hasn't aged since getting the virus, he heals at an incredible rate, is invulnerable to minor injuries, resistant to toxins and disease, and he can even release the Death Spore virus from his body at will, taking his victims' lives nearly instantly if he chooses to.
Number 10. Chameleon. Chameleon made his first appearance in the very first issue of The Amazing Spider-Man. Although there are a lot of other famous supervillains that people think of when it comes to Peter Parker's gallery of famous and capable rogues, Chameleon was the first that Spider-Man would come up against. In this very first issue, Spider-Man attempted to join the Fantastic Four, who basically fight him due to the fact that they think he's some kind of villain for breaking into the Baxter Building. Of course, Spider-Man was only attempting to do so to impress them so they would invite him to join their team. When they refused to accept him into the team, Spider-Man set on his own to fight crime, and Chameleon disguised himself as Spider-Man to protect his own identity while committing crimes himself, ruining Spidey's reputation and ensuing Peter to go up against Chameleon to put a stop to him. Number 9. Dr. Von Doom and his Doombots. Sounds like a cool band. Dr. Von Doom and his Doombots. We were first introduced to Dr. Doom as a supervillain in issue 5 of the first volume of the Fantastic Four. In his introductory issue, the famous and brilliant villain used his brains and gadgets to capture the Fantastic Four. He wanted them to help him capture Blackbeard's treasure by using a time travel machine that he had constructed to send them into the past. In the end, they tricked him with a chest full of chains, and the thing smashed Dr. Doom to bits, only to find out that the Doom that they were dealing with was actually a robotic copy. The actual Doom also ended up getting defeated as well, and the Fantastic Four got away. But this certainly wouldn't be the last that they would see of Doom, who would become their most iconic foe. Number 8. Miracle Man. What's up with all these original Fantastic Four rogues who kidnapped Invisible Woman, by the way, or Invisible Girl as she was known then? Apparently kidnapping Sue was a classic villain move back in the day. Miracle Man was originally a stage magician who claimed that he was even more powerful than the Fantastic Four, who just so happened to be in his audience when he was performing. After that he proved this in his stage show, he decided that he should probably become a criminal. He was so talented and smart and obviously, I guess, selfish and villainous somewhat, if he decided to go that route as opposed to the heroic one, that he made the Fantastic Four think that a promotional statue for a film called The Monster of Mars had come to life. While the Fantastic Four were distracted dealing with that whole scenario, he pulled off a series of robberies. But don't worry, he was defeated. After, of course, he kidnapped the Invisible Girl. Like I said, that's a thing that people like to do back in the day.
Number 7. Horticulture. You know, sometimes a group of villains comes along that just kinda makes me smile. And Horticulture, who first appeared in X-Men Volume 5, Number 3 in December 2019, are one such group. Horticulture is described on their wiki as a group of agrochemists, biotechnologists, and eugenic engineers who specialize in the genetic manipulation and propagation of all things botanical. So, to me and my tiny brain, I take that information and translate it to, it's a bunch of old plant scientist ladies. Because that's what they are. It's a bunch of older ladies who are seeking to radically depopulate humans from the Earth in order to bring the Earth and nature to a state of balance. With the climate the way it is right now, it's actually kind of an understandable cause, even if it's utterly insane. Using their know-how, they made biological modifications to themselves, like resistance to telepathy and extended lifespans, but they also developed technology to manipulate their environment, inhibit mutant powers, and generate illusions on men. But they also have experience as computer programmers, being able to access the Krakoan gateways and trade information with the villainous anti-mutant group known as Orcus.
Number 6. Dr. Sivana. If you've seen the film Shazam, you likely are familiar with Dr. Sivana, or if you're aware of the Captain Marvel / Shazam comics. He was one of the first villains that Shazam actually came up against and made his comic book debut in Whiz Comics issue number 2. His first master plot of villainy? To ransom radio waves. The 1940s, what a time. He asked for $50 million and if he wasn't paid, threatened to create radio silence everywhere. Because this was the 40s, of course, that was a really big deal. Although right now we'd probably be like, who listens to the radio? But also $50 million is an insane amount of money to ask for. I feel like if Dr. Sivana hadn't been so greedy, it might have worked out better for him. Because $50 million in the 1940s? Jeez! In the end, Billy Batson and his Captain Marvel form defeated Sivana by smashing his radio silencer tech, which was like this huge machine by the way, to smithereens. But as promised, the Doctor would return to battle Captain Marvel, or as he's known now, Shazam, again, becoming one of his mainstay villains. Number 5. Joe Chill. While we didn't know who he was at the time, Joe Chill would go on to become a huge supervillain in Batman's life. He would be known to Bruce Wayne as the man responsible for the death of Batman's parents. Well, responsible. More, he was known as the perpetrator. The circumstances surrounding the murder of Martha and Thomas Wayne in regards to it being part of a great plot or just a random mugging gone wrong would continue to be explored even after we found out Joe Chill's name. Either way, Joe Chill has been a huge villain in Batman's life anyways, because he took away Bruce Wayne's parents, which is kinda Batman's whole thing. Number 4. The Monk. The Monk first appeared in Detective Comics issue number 31, shortly after Batman's first appearance a few issues previously. He is often dressed in red robes, but his first appearance also featured him wearing a red cloth bag with eye holes on his head, marked with a skull and crossbones. So stylish. This was way back when Bruce Wayne also had a fiancée named Julie. The Monk ends up hypnotizing and kidnapping Julie. Batman, however, ends up chasing him down and facing a castle filled with booby traps in order to save his fiancée, who does not know apparently that her betrothed Bruce is actually the Bat. The issue ends with Batman swearing vengeance, soaring off to Hungary to find the Monk and his werewolves? I just love that part because I'm always like, wait, what do you mean you're going after his werewolves? He has werewolves? What? Did we find that out in that issue? I don't remember that being mentioned, but maybe I forgot. Number 3. Dr. Death. While his New 52 appearance is terrifying, Dr. Death actually first appeared in Detective Comics Volume 1, issue number 29, and looked just like your average mad scientist guy. He was one of the first supervillains that Batman ever encountered and is often known as a producer of biological weapons. You know, evil mad science stuff. Like most of Batman's supervillains, he isn't superpowered himself. His first appearance saw him being apprehended by Batman only to go down in a blaze of flames, though at least Batman tried to stop him from going down in a blaze of glory by tossing a fire extinguisher at him. So helpful, Batman, thanks for that. Needless to say, this wouldn't be the end of Dr. Death and we would definitely see him again. Now he's got that crazy bone serum that just makes bones grow everywhere. Used it himself, so he's got these crazy teeth. You should show them the picture. Number 2. Ultra Humanite. One of Superman's first foes before Lex Luthor even. I know, it's crazy. If you haven't noticed yet, comics both seemed to act as a celebration for science while also having an obsession for its less honorable uses via mad science, as we like to call it. That's its own category of science for you science nerds out there. Just kidding. I know mad science isn't an actual category, but it should be. Apparently old school views were that science is awesome but can also be super dangerous, which, I mean, true. Ultra Humanite's brand of mad science came in the form of body swapping. A brilliant mind trapped in a frail, old, crippled body, Geralt dreamed of setting himself free of his decrepit and failing body and conquering the world. Just normal dreams, you know how it is. Becoming Ultra Humanite, he is known for inhabiting various female bodies in the DC universe, including Terra's for a time. Kinda weird. And for inhabiting the body of an albino ape. Those are his things. He's into apes and swapping bodies with ladies. It's normal. It's fine. Number 1. Namor. The Submariner appeared even before Marvel was called Marvel. Well, now he is definitely more anti-hero, and he never really has been a bad guy when it comes to him as a character. He's definitely also a bit of a jerk with a dark side, even when he's acting heroically, which, not going to lie, is part of the reason that I think we all love him so much. He's just so complex. He can be anything he wants or anything he needs to be. A villain, a hero, an anti-hero. However, when he was first introduced in the Fantastic Four comics in issue number 4 of volume 1 in the early 60s, way after his initial introduction in April of 1939, I know, it was as a villain to the Fantastic Four. After remembering his life as Prince of the Sea, Namor returns to his lost home of Atlantis only to find that it had been destroyed by the radioactive pollution of atomic tests. He seeks vengeance, and the Fantastic Four must stop him as he aims to attack the land, destroying the city and causing harm to the land dwellers who he deems responsible for the destruction of his home. Which was very villainous at the time, but I feel like now a lot of us are cool with this because we're like, hey, you know, the ocean's real polluted, so like, yeah, fair enough. Also, they really did that. They really used to set off atomic bomb tests underwater. That's a thing that we did. Shame on us.